Hey, and welcome to the Neurodivergent Musician Podcast, where I explore the world of neurodiversity and musicianship. I'm your host, Jon Hart, along with Luna, my guitar, and today I'll be talking about songwriting and composing. Each episode is broken up into a traffic format where I'll share insights in the red section, improvised babble in the amber, and a recommendation you might find handy in the green. So let's head on over to the red section for more insights. So as we embark on a journey that celebrates our neurodivergent identity, a gift that breathes life into our creative process, infusing it with innovation and ingenuity. Drawing insights from psychology, we'll delve into how our diverse thought patterns weave intricate threads into the music tapestry we create, making it all more captivating and unique. As we venture into the science of inspiration, we unlock the secrets of our neurodivergent minds, finely tuned to recognize patterns and form connections that spark our creativity. Neuroscience unveils the natural wellspring of memorizing melodies and harmonies, captivating our listeners' hearts and minds in a truly profound way. Crafting our distinct sound palette is a venture that takes us into the realm of psychology, exploring synesthesia, which I'll go into another episode about. A phenomenon where our senses intertwine in extraordinary ways. With our sensory sensitivities, we paint our compositions with a rich layering of emotions, creating music that resonates deeply within those who listen. Lyrics become the heartbeats of our songs, and psychology shows us that our heightened emotional experiences are a goldmine for lyrical expression. Our neurodivergent perspectives infuse our storytelling with authenticity, lending a powerful voice to our compositions that resonate with truth and raw emotion. Every creative journey encounters obstacles, and here we draw from psychological strategies to confront perfectionism, self-doubt, and creative blocks head on. As neurodivergent musicians, our resilience shines through as we navigate these challenges, emerging stronger, our creativity unwavering and unbreakable. Peering into the science behind song structures, we uncover the minds of neurodivergent musicians. Our cognitive diversity often leads to arrangements that defy norms and captivate audiences. From unexpected chord progressions to intricate arrangements, our compositions stand as a testament to our unique thought processes and boundless creativity. Emotion becomes the fuel that ignites the fire of creativity. Through a psychological lens, we explore how our heightened emotional experiences act as a catalyst for profound compositions. Our music becomes a conduit, channeling our emotions and inviting listeners to share in the mosaic of our feelings. Our signature is the rhythm we bring, distinctive and uniquely neurodivergent. Drawn from science, we uncover how our perspective of time and rhythm give rise to compositions that transcend predictability. Our unique sense of rhythm breathes life into melodies, transforming them into intricate patterns that resonate deeply within the hearts of those who listen. Mindfulness meets music in this segment, as we incorporate psychology to explore the art of staying present in the creative process. By cultivating mindfulness, neurodivergent musicians deepen their connection to their compositions, infusing them with intention and resonance that radiates far beyond the notes themselves. Our journey culminates in celebrating the power of sharing our compositions. Drawing from your personal experiences, we can explore how the fusion of psychology, science, and your neurodivergent artistry has the potential to touch lives, fostering understanding and ignite change in a way that only music can. So that's it for the insights. I'm now going to go into the amber section for some improvised babble. See you then. Okay, so we are now into the amber section, and I'm just going to go into some improvised thoughts. So thinking about two sides of the coin, I call it songwriting and I call it composition. I don't weave them two together. I am a songwriter, but I'm also a composer. So I'm a solo guitarist and I'm a guitarist singer. And I love to tread both of these worlds. Now, back in the day, as a singer-songwriter, a rock and pop singer-songwriter, I used to strum and pick, and then I used to sing over the top. But I quickly found, I created an album, I did a few EPs, but I felt like I was an entertainer. I was writing for what was trending at the time and not what I was feeling. And that's when there was a disconnect. That's when you feel out of sync. And that actually, I feel that comparison is a neurodivergent living in a neurotypical world. As a musician, I felt like I was, a neurodivergent living in a neurotypical world. I was a square peg in a round hole. So when I came around to performing these tracks, it just felt disconnected. I felt like, I could be a comedian. I could be these other things, but it was other hats. It wasn't the hat that I naturally wore. It'd be like, putting on fancy dress or wearing different clothes and knowing that I'm pretending to be someone. I'm an actor right now. I'm pretending to be someone else. And yeah, like actors, they're method actors, all types of actors, they will train for a role. They may go into a process of 6 months of just being that role. But once they finished it, and once they finish recording it and filming it, they go back to being themselves. They take a piece of each role with them, and that can sometimes slot into their personality, into their world. But if you are constantly that act, then you're disconnecting yourself. Now, there are a lot of artists, especially, and this is not all, but there's a lot of pop artists who I guarantee if they didn't have the rules, the regulations, the boundaries of their songwriting and composition, I guarantee they would create something different. I'd love to see the likes of, someone like Ed Sheeran or anyone at the top of the chain create something where it was progressive. It was completely and utterly progressive. And it wasn't 4 chords. It wasn't, simple structures. They work, and it works for the fan base, and it works for the crowd, and it works with everything else that's written, and I love his lyrics and I love his phrasing. I just think sometimes, musicality with the 4 chords, that I would love to hear 7 chords, 8 chords, or something that changes in a way that's just like, music in my mind is not A to B. You don't have to go through structures, the same structure every time, where you go intro, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. What if you just went section A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and just kept that going? If I went to go to travel from England over to Australia, on that particular journey and that holiday, yes, there is an A to B, which could be, from here to Australia, but actually the path that you get there, they are all the letters of the alphabet. So I'm actually going, A is England, Z is Australia. But what I don't do is go A, and then I get on a plane and I go to somewhere, and then I come back to it. Then I go back and I go back to it. That's what I feel like music's like. It needs those hooks most of the time for the poppy stuff, the catchy stuff. But music's progressive, like life is. I can't reverse my age. If I'm 40 and then I turn 41, I can't go back to that catchy chorus of 40. I've got to continuously keep going. So this is how I see it in music now these days. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't repeat and I don't go back. There is sort of lines that you can themes that you can blend in, and you can start to bring in recurring themes, and those recurring things can come back in your life. You know, you've got characteristic traits that can, you know, rebound and keep coming back. But I think sometimes with music, a great way is just to kind of unlearn everything. In not in regards to your learning your instrument, in regards to the songwriting process. Try and take away everything you've learned and try and approach a piece of art in a way that you're like, right, I have got some tools at my fingertips and things as well, but I'm not going to think about the tools. I'm not going to think about the technique. I'm not going to think about the theory. I'm not going to think about what this is about, this piece of music, this piece of art. I'm just going to express what I feel right now. And then if you can mimic that, then you are on the road to authenticity. You are on the road to a distinctive sound. And there is something about finding your sound that is really, really vital. And it can, for a lot of musicians, it can take a lifetime, because there's a lot of copycats out there. They want to sound like this person. They want to sound like this person. And in an industry where you need to get opportunities, a lot of industry folk want to know who you sound like. And if you say, oh, I don't sound like anyone, then it's really difficult. So they need to have a reference point. I'd rather have a reference point of people who are completely distinctive and unique rather than the mainstream. Because I found when I was in the singer-songwriter lane, I was in a lane that was crowded and incredibly saturated. There's a lot of strummy, picky singer-songwriters out there who sing over the top. So their vocals are the primary instrument, and then their instrument, you know, their guitar or their piano, is secondary. This is not all. And when I started feeling like an entertainer when I was at that point. I was like, oh, this is rocky poppy stuff. It was all right, but to me, it sounded shit. I was just like, oh, this is not me. I don't want to be performing these songs, 20, 30 years time. It doesn't fit with me. So I then had to go on a 2-year training mission, not under a mentor, not under anyone particular, but I had to rediscover who I am. I had to connect my heart and my head together and find out who the hell is Jon Hart. I've learned all these tools. I've learned all these techniques and theory and things as well. But who am I? I don't want to constantly be doing all the time. I want to be. I want to feel emotionally connected to my music. And one way I did that is on guitar, there's something called standard tuning, EADGBE. Now, if you're not a guitarist, don't worry, but this is just a little bit of knowledge with it. But what I find with standard tuning to me is the learning tuning. Now, the thing is with standard tuning as well, is there's so many greats. There's so many influences that have influenced that tuning. So to try and carve out something distinctive and unique and heartfelt is really, really hard. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be expressive, but I used to always find if I was expressive in standard tuning, I'd sound like Jimi Hendrix or Stevie Ray Vaughan, or I'd sound like some acoustic players, or I'd sound like this. And I felt like I was in the waters, and it was just all of these greats were in those waters. And I was like, how am I going to carve out my own identity here? And that's why with guitar, you can go into something called open tunings. So you can retune your guitar to sound like a chord. And the beauty of that is you're not having to put multiple fingers down to create a chord. You've got this beautiful open chord. You've got alternate tunings as well. Now, the great thing about having open tunings and alternate tunings you are not just restricted to one tuning. Open tunings and alternate tunings, they can go into, there's multiples. So once you pick one, you then realize you're in clear water. You know, there are some there are some tunings. There's one called DAGAD, DADGAD, and there's a lot of guitarists who've tried that. But I have one that is CGDGCD. Now, again, if this is getting to guitar, geeky, then you can speed this up. Which I suggest for most of the podcasts. Don't listen to it on just 1%, speed it up to 1.5 or whatever it is. But it's really interesting because standard tuning to me feels like learning tuning. I always feel like I'm restricted to shapes and scales and things as well. When I go to open tuning, you don't know the map. This is where it's like going into, a new part of the world that you've never gone to. You're seeing things fresh for the first time. But if I've mastered standard tuning, or, I've got the tools and everything I need, I've got the dexterity and I've built up, all the strength in my fingers, and I know how to do runs, and I know how to do these techniques, and I know how to do these things in standard way. When I enter into open tuning and I enter into, alternate tunings, this would be like if you've traveled parts of the world, you then go and travel to another country. Because you've had experience of traveling, you have experience, and you're about to be able to then open yourself up to the possibilities of this place. So you're not worried about sort of travel anxiety as much. You can get it, but the more experience you have, the easier it gets. So for instance, if you traveled around, all parts of Europe, and then you went over, America, and then you went over to somewhere like Australia, you've done a lot of traveling already. So you can start to take in things. You can start to be more open. And that's what I find when I go to an open tuning and alternate tuning. I'm not completely leaving my technique and theory at the door, but I'm not going out of my way to learn scales in that open tuning. I'm not going out of my way to learn new techniques to do that. I'm bringing what I know, going into that new open tuning and just exploring. And the wonderful thing about exploring something like this with simple tweaks, as in like you just tune a few strings and you are in open waters, it is so powerful. It has allowed me to come up with compositions that connect deeply with my heart. Excuse the pun, Jon Hart. But there's got to be other ways that other instruments can do this. So for instance, if you're a drummer and you've been learning standard in certain ways, and there's a configuration, and I grew up with a mate, best mate Dave, he contacted me recently, and he was talking about the podcast, and we were talking about memories of when we were 8. I got my first nylon guitar and then went over to his, and he didn't have a drum kit. It was probably too loud, but he was also 8 years old, 9, and he's got an uncle who's got a huge, wonderful, diverse taste in music, from Frank Zappa, and then we listen to Sting, we listen to Police, and we listen to so many different wonderful artists. And he introduced me to 10 Summerless Towers by Sting. But what I love what Dave used to do, he used to get the cushions out off the sofa and then use his sticks on the cushions. And so he is going there without having to buy all the gear, and it's exploration. We're watching these DVDs of 10 Summerless Towers and then watching these amazing musicians, and then going, what could we create with what we have? I mean, I didn't really know a lot what was going on. Dave was much further along than I was in regards to technique and ability. But I think those little sessions that we had were improvisation, exploration, and really just like the true meaning of music, where you feel it. Technique and theory are important. Buying gear, yes. gear is, and I've said this in previous podcasts, gear does not help you learn your instrument. It helps you enhance the sound. And maybe, you know, obviously you get a better guitar, you can play faster, you know, especially when you go from an acoustic to electric or whatever it is. But it doesn't teach you how to learn. But also, getting new gear does not teach you how to express yourself, how to connect with it emotionally. And those sessions back in the day were so vital. And it's wonderful to get a message from Dave recently to hear that he's listening to podcasts and we're resonating together. And there are a lot of musicians out there who will resonate with this podcast, because you might start to hear things that you're like, oh, that sounds like me. Oh, yes. And I think when you start entering the world of musicianship, you go through a learning process and then you accept your abilities, and then you create what you need or what you want out of those abilities. And I think it's the same with neurodiversity. Once you learn more about yourself, you go on this internal journey. This learning phase can, it can heighten and make your symptoms worse, I've heard, with more awareness. But I think over time, it will slot back into your identity. So when I started going into neurodiversity, I sort of started feeling, oh, there's, I've already diagnosed with dyslexia. I said, dyslexic John. Oh, is there ADHD John? Is there autistic John? Is there, am I this and this and this? And it feels like I've got split personalities. But that's because I'm in this learning phase. And I think musicians go through this as well. And that's why I think people will be able to resonate with this, because if you are curious about neurodiversity as a musician, and you start to see there's traits, because I feel like I'm caught in a world of creativity all the time, and I'm really great at what I do on my instrument, but I'm pretty shit at the rest of the parts of my life. And I've always felt like I'm not useless, I'm not incompetent, I'm not uncaring, I'm not naturally impulsive, but these things just happen. I didn't understand why. And since I've been going on this learning mission, my music has got better. I've explored even more, because now I know more about myself. And I think that's when you're learning your instrument and you're starting to consume music, the most vital thing is, I found, music should evoke an emotion. Learning can do that. But if we're constantly learning, we're never able to transfer over to that emotional state. So when I have pupils, whether it's singing, guitar, piano, whatever it is, I want them to play rather than practice. I want them to feel rather than learn all the time. I want them to just experience rather than be stuck with their head in a book. I want them to explore rather than feel restricted with, oh, I don't have that technique. Oh, I don't have all these chords. Oh, I don't have all this and stuff as well. It's fine. You can build beauty out of just 2 chords. You could build beauty just out of 2 notes. I mean, Gary Moore, when he did Parisian Walkways, there's a part on the solo, and again, this is pentatonic, this is standard tuning, and this is why I don't want to, I don't want to go up against people like Gary Moore and other guitarists, because they created wonderful things. But he held on one note. I think it's the live version. And that expression, the vibrato, the bends, everything he was creating in that, bending it up a quarter and then maybe a half, and then, for like a minute. And some people might not like that, but it evoked an emotion in me. And I was like, that's one ruddy note. And I don't get that. That doesn't evoke an emotion in me when I play it, but when I hear it, yeah, it does. But what I've noticed since I've gone into open tunings and alternate tunings, I could go to one alternate tuning and there's not one famous mainstream guitarist I know using that tuning all the time. I've got 2 tunings at the moment, And if you wanted to go geeky with it would be C-Add9 tunings. And I've seen some guitarists maybe use it for one song, and that's it. But I've used it for majority of an album. So I'm not saying that it belongs to me at all, but people are starting to resonate with that sound. This is my sound. This is where I have a well of wonderful ideas and wonderful creativity. So I go to my guitar now to go, tell me how I feel. So then I play. Then I might do a wrong note there, so I could have gone. But then I went. Yeah, and it just kind of like makes it a bit quirky. Harmonics become, they sound like church bells. There's so much more scope. And obviously, yeah, I can add in the percussion, I can add all these other things. But it's allowed me to be incredibly expressive. And it allows me not just to sit there with technique all the time. So when I'm creating songwriting, it will be the guitar first. I might, go and have a shower and then start coming up with melodies and all sorts of things. I used to be, like a melody monster, where I used to be in bands and I could come up with hooks and things all the time. And that's the rocky poppy background. But when it comes to my guitar, I'm like, no, I don't want strummy picky. I don't want 4 chords. I don't want any of that. I want this intricate, mosaic piece that really tells the story in so many areas. The bass line can depict a part of the story, and then I can mimic those rhythm instruments, whether it's piano, it's brass, it's strings, or whatever it is. And then you can have your decorative instruments. So it could be, a second vocalist, a backing vocalist, or you can have a saxophone, or you can things as well. And imagine, and then you can have the drummer. And again, I don't mimic drums on my guitar. A lot of modern fingerstyle guitarists can break it down like that. But I like to introduce them as South American percussion. So it would be like congas, bongos, gueros, all that sort of stuff as well. That feels much more authentic because it doesn't sound like a drum kit. And I grew up with a drummer. And, I sort of feel it's disrespectful me calling I'm mimicking drums. I'm mimicking South American percussion. And what that allows me to do as well is to go and team up with a drummer. But anyway, the point is, I also feel that a lot of musicians should try and delve into pure solo playing. Try and get a beautiful song, song or piece with just one instrument. So vocally, if you do a cappella, you can create something that's really wonderful and haunting, jump it between octaves, whatever it is. I love folky, tribal kind of sort of a cappella singing and chants and all that sort of stuff. But then it's like, if you hear a saxophone, when I hear saxophone with reverb, oh my goodness, it's beautiful. You don't need anything else. Same with the piano, same with the guitar, same with the drum kit, whatever it is. Try and strip away from everything else. Yes, a band sounds amazing. Yes, you can put backing tracks behind it for all these sort of things. Yes, you can use a looping pedal. But what happens if you go and just do it all organically? What happens if you just turn up, unplugged, and you try and create this rich tapestry where it really evokes the emotion? And when it comes around to songwriting and composing, if you're coming into that with that mindset where you're like, do you know what? I'm going to have no restrictions on this. Whatever comes out, comes out. I'm going to let the tap run, get all the dirty water out and let the clean stuff out, as Ed Sheeran, he said in a quote once. If you do that And you don't approach it with, oh, I'm going to go and write in this key, or I'm going to write it with this. Beautiful songs have come out of that. There's no doubt about it. But if you venture into the land of just pure exploration, like if you went to a new country and you didn't know anything about it, you didn't take any guides, you didn't take anything, then you went down to, you just put your feet onto the land, you looked around, you then maybe got on a, some transport, bus, taxi, whatever it is, train, you looked outside, you did these things. You might then meet new people. You might go to an information office. You might do this, but you're doing it all naturally. The map sort of materializes, gradually, but you're not forcing it. And that way you use what you have. So if you are limited on your technique, if you're limited on your theory, and you're limited on your gear in regards to you don't have a very good instrument, you feel, get the best out of it, of what you got. Just use exploration first. And then you can treat it like a Loden bar. If you wanted to, you could go and create a little idea, seed idea, and then it will grow into a tree. But trees do not just grow, like, it's not just one trunk. There are multiple branches, multiple twigs, then the leaves on the end. But sometimes you need to develop those branches and twigs to get to the leaves. But a lot of musicians stop and they don't actually get to that golden stuff to the end. If you allowed a song to do that, I guarantee you'd be creating your best work. But that is a subject, obviously that's just a subjective thought. And this is from my own, songwriting, composition as well. Sometimes I went into like solo guitar realm where I just wanted to create solo guitar pieces. I don't just want to be the singer-songwriter. I don't just want to be the fingerstyle guitarist. I wanted to be, I wanted to go into classical guitar. Why not? I would love to go and learn another instrument. I'd love to go and learn drums properly instead of just beatboxing. I would love to go and learn the saxophone. But I know I'm, 3 decades into learning the guitar. And for me to be able to go and get another instrument up to that point where you technically feel like you've got freedom. I understand when you're in a learning phase that it's the technical aspect. It's the muscle memory to be able to get to the freedom where you can just completely express yourself. There is a training phase and it's vital. But, and this is why I sort of feel I didn't want to take on multiple instruments. Guitar and singing. Singing is great because I can just carry it around me and sing whenever I want. Guitar takes a little bit more time. But if you can get to a point where you're like, right, I've got enough technique, theory, and gear for now, I'm just going to explore. Not learning other people's songs. That is a great exercise, but is it really part of your authentic process? Is it really part of your heart? I mean, obviously, if it's a song from your childhood, then yeah, great. But how about learning all the layers of that song on your guitar or your piano or whatever it is? If you can get to a point where you can capture the magic of other people's songs and then put them onto one instrument, or you can take, memories of your past and then emulate them on your instrument. So for instance, if I've got a musical memory, I did Money by Pink Floyd, I did The Chain, I took all of the layers and then transferred them on the guitar so I can carry around them as timeless arrangements. So those memories from my past, now, I carry them around with me. Every time I play Money, I think about my dad in the car. It's the same with compositions. If you've got memories of your childhood or whatever it is, and you want to carry those around, then develop them. Artists do it in paintings. Writers do it in books and journals. Musicians do it on their instruments. That is a beautiful way of coming up with songwriting and composition ideas. Take a memory, work out all the colors, work out all the textures, whatever it is, and transfer them onto your instrument. If standard tuning does not capture all of it, because I find it's quite restrictive in regards to the range of the range of pitched notes. This is why I like to go down to like a drop C, because it widens the range. Like if you were to play a piano, if you were to play in the middle of the piano, you're very restrictive of your sound. Whereas if you move your left hand, further down the octaves and then your right hand further up or whatever it is, you've just got this wider, thick, rich sound. And that's what I'd like to capture on my guitar. Then just try and do that as well. Try and emulate memories. That's a beautiful way of developing your own sound. And this is what I talk about your spices. You need your sound, your purpose, your identity, then consistency, excitement, and success will come along with it. But if you're forcing it, then that's where ruts can happen. That's where things can fall off the cliff. If you let it flow, some of my compositions took me 6 to 8 months, maybe a whole year to develop. Whereas I used to write a song a day or whatever it was back in the day, thinking that was the greatest way. But actually, no. One, quality over quantity is better. And just focusing on one at a time. Have I captured that complete memory? Have I captured exactly how I'm feeling? Yeah. So that is it for my improvised babble. It's not gone into obviously the intricacies of theory, technique, or whatever it is, because I think there's a pre-frame. You need to get the psychology, in my opinion, for songwriting and composition for your own development set first. So you almost go in there with your heart and head going, I don't care about everything else. I want to be able to capture this. And then the technique and theory and everything else will come along with it. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think on that. So we're now going to go into the green section for a recommendation. Okay, so we're now into the green section. I realize that this podcast is now getting into the late 30s and 40s in regards to minutes. So I'm going to keep this very short and sweet. 2 recommendations for you is take yourself outside of your bedroom or inside the house, wherever you practice. I mean, obviously keeping an instrument open, so outside of cases, is really, really important. So you can just pass by it, you can have a little play, and then you can put it down and go. But what I would do is take the instrument, if you can. Now, obviously I've got a guitar, but if you've got other instruments, and take them outside. I remember when I was talking about Dave, and he used to do air drumming, and he used to write little sort of drum setups on his page. And I used to watch this, I used to watch him do this when we were in our English lessons or whatever it was and stuff as well. And he was visualizing how to play it and, and where he'd like to set up things. So it was magical to watch. And I kind of would do the same thing if I would use my arm as a way of visualizing my guitar. But if you're able to take your instrument out, so it could be a ukulele, if it's a piano, you could visualize it. But I would take yourself into nature. So you can go in the middle of a forest. You could go, if you live near the seaside, so go near the sea, whatever it is, environment, you can take yourself to the local shopping center and just listen to things, and then try and see if you can mimic or emulate that sound on your instrument. It's just another way of exploration without feeling that you're constrained to these techniques and theory and the way that we've been taught, in music lessons, whatever it is and stuff. You need to do it this way. And it's like, no, music can come from all angles, and emulating things is a really powerful way. I emulated a wind chime, and it's become one of my best songs, and a lot of people love it. And I'm just like, brilliant. That was me mimicking a different instrument and then building a song around it. And then the song now is about finding peace in busy areas. But it started as a seed of just mimicking, another instrument. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, collaborating with other musicians, if you can. And, I did a tour with the awesome Daryl Kelly. He had a barge, we went down and we created an album on the, we went along the River Thames, played a few gigs and stuff as well. And Daryl's ability and his expression and his freedom in the way he plays and multiple genres that he mixes in and the fusion of all of it. I was also mesmerized by just the person Daryl is. So when you've got the person and the playing connected together, that's influential. It's the same as when I've toured with Manelli Jamal and Billy Watman, and I've gigged with, Chris Woods and Wilma Nickel and, Amrit Son and lots of others. You pick up different things, when you go to either go and watch them or when you play alongside them or you jam alongside someone. It doesn't have to just be guitar. It could be other instrumentalists and things. And you can take little seeds of maybe what they've done and then like little pinches of salt. It's like life experiences. You can have a life experience, but you wouldn't take that whole experience and then weave it back into your own life. You might take a little tiny part of it and go, right, just what, I'm going to expand on this and try and adapt it in my own way. So I've heard some other guitarists play something called harp harmonics. And then I've sort of seen it the way they've done it, and then seen another guitarist do it. And then I've then weaved it into my own playing and then sort of created a section in a song or whatever it is. But I haven't forced it. It has to flow. So you can be influenced, but what my opinion is of that is, don't be influenced to the point where your playing sounds like that other musician. Be influenced in a way that it then becomes exploration. So you're like, do you know what? This is a tiny little gem that I've got here, but I'm going to develop it into my style, into my sound, into my purpose, into my identity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So collaboration and taking yourself away into nature, wherever it is a really, really powerful way of coming up with fresh ideas for your songwriting or composition. So that is it for this episode. I hope you found it useful. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. Or if it's a car crash, just put it on when you're going to sleep, because hopefully, I don't know, you might find it interesting. It might help you. But if you know any other musicians that are curious about neurodiversity, I've had a few messages about it. And this podcast is about awareness. This is not about how you get diagnosed. This is not how you go and find out the process. You can go and send me any questions about that and I can direct you of what I've done. But I'm not an expert. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a professor. If you want to learn more about ADHD, go to the ADHD Adults podcast. If you want to learn more about, I know stuff about dyslexia, but I'm in the learning process as well. And this is why I want to do this podcast where I'm not an expert yet. I don't know if I ever will be. But I wanted to show you I'm in the middle of this process and I'm just sharing my experiences with you. And if you want to come and share your experiences, I've got a Facebook group called the Neurodivergent Musicians. I'm building up this community of musicians who are either neurodivergent or curious, or they are neurotypical and they've got a friend who is neurodivergent, and you just want to find out more information and stuff. So those links are in the description. And thank you so much for listening. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Cheers. Take care.